Hey everyone, before we get started with today's episode, I just want to say a massive thank you for all the support we've had on the podcast, from the guests that have made reaching 110 episodes possible. And 110 episodes is no small feat. To those of you that download, share, like, subscribe to the podcast, it's all massively appreciated. As I'm sure everyone on Earth at this point is aware, we are in the grips of a horrible pandemic, and the latest wave of restrictions put in place here in the UK have all but destroyed my business. I am asking anyone that is able to head over to patreon.com/Kris Karl Photography Podcast, and any donation you can make is hugely appreciated. With all that said, let's jump into today's episode. I actually first found you through a recommendation from another photographer when I was looking to switch to Fuji for my wedding work. And we'll talk about cameras and we'll talk about weddings as we go. But I guess the obvious place to start is just why it is that you became a photographer. Why did you pick up a camera for the first time?
Well, good question. I don't know. I've always had sort of like an interest in it. My dad shot film when he was younger, and he had his own darkroom and stuff. And like, not to get too deep too quickly, but like he left when I was quite young and like didn't come back, but I don't see him anymore. But I always had that sort of memory of like him developing film and shooting cameras and stuff in my head. So I always kind of grew up with an interest. But it wasn't until actually I got married in 2014 that I got my first camera, like shortly after my wedding day, as a present from my father-in-law. And from then I was just hooked. Like it was literally like an addiction, but like one that I was happy to have, if that makes sense.
The early expectations when you get that first camera, is it that it's just going to be a hobby, something you mill about with, or were you fairly optimistic from the get-go it was something you could go quite far with?
No, not at all. I never went into it with the intention of, you know, having a business or doing it professionally. It was just a hobby. You know, I had a son at the time. I think he was only like 1.5 or 2 years old. And I enjoyed taking pictures of him and my wife. And I was really into sort of like landscape and nature photography and stuff like that. And it kind of grew from there, you know, how it usually starts. Like a friend of a friend asked me to take some pictures, and then another one. And as you're like, I don't think it ever would have got this far without the help of social media, obviously, because as you're sharing pictures, you know, it kind of spreads like a virus, doesn't it? The more people that see it, the more people that talk about you and recommend you and stuff. And it just grew from there.
From like a photographic point of view, your first few weddings that you shot, what was that feeling like? Was it exciting, or was it something that terrified you? How was it to shoot weddings for the first time?
Yeah, both excitement and utter terror that you're going to, you know, ball something up or do something wrong or miss a shot, miss a moment. Yeah, I mean, the first one I did was for a lovely lady. I think her name was, Chantel, actually, Canvey Island, which is near Essex. And yeah, I mean, I've come a long way since then. I shot very differently back then. You know, I was heavily into Photoshop and stuff and editing and stuff. And to be honest with you, the final images, she looked nothing like what she did in real life. I remember her sharing them on Facebook and stuff, and, you know, all people commenting going like, "Oh, Chantel, you look lovely," and me thinking, I don't know who that is, but that's not Chantel. You know, I've created this new person, and yes, she does look nice. But so yeah, it kind of grew from that. And then, you know, over years and stuff, you prefer, especially once I started shooting more film, I barely ever touch Photoshop. Like all my editing for digital is just done in Lightroom. And then obviously film, I very minimal tweaks and stuff like that. So I kind of prefer to just keep it true to natural life now.
So what is it that's driven your style to end up where it is at the moment? What was it that took you out of photoshopping Chantel or whoever to such an extreme and took you to more of a natural look?
Laziness. No, I don't know. I think, especially when it comes to shooting film and stuff, there's something about that element of just like capturing a person in that moment as they are, you know, and keeping it true to life and stuff. And even with my digital editing, I'll do like color corrections, you know, and exposure and stuff like that. And I might, you know, use the brush tool in Lightroom or something to get rid of a spot, but I will pretty much just keep it to how it is. And that's just, I guess, my personal preference for photography, especially when it comes to portraiture and stuff.
I find something quite interesting with wedding photography because it's always evolving. And I think especially England, we tend to look at the States a lot stylistically and where they're going. We always seem to be about a year behind them, depending on trends and whatnot. In terms of your own work, like how close are you to producing the stuff that's like really what you want to be doing? Are you someone that really likes your own work at the moment? Or are you like I personally have just a constant problem with self-hatred when it comes to my own work. I always want to be getting better.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, to be honest with you, if anyone is at a level where they're comfortable and they think, oh, my work is the bee's knees, I'm happy where I am, then they've stopped progressing. And I think you never want to get to that stage. I always want to be getting better and improving in certain things. So I wouldn't say that I have self-hatred for my work, but then you get to a point where, like 2 years later, you look back at what you were doing 2 years ago, and that's where the cringe comes in. You're like, oh my God, I can't believe I used to do that. Yeah, I'm not 100% happy with what I'm doing at the moment, but I do feel like I'm moving in the right direction and kind of almost the direction that I wanted to move, like 6 years ago. I knew where I wanted to be in terms of a photographer, and I feel like I am getting there, but how long that will take, you don't know.
What do you think the most undervalued skill of a wedding photographer is?
Wedding photographer, people skills. I think you need to be able to get involved and mingle with people. Obviously, you've got, when it comes to wedding photography, like fine art wedding photography, where it's just, nice pictures of nice people and their nice flowers and their nice clothes and stuff like that. But for me, definitely a great deal of like documentary work is what I aspire to. And like documentary photographers that I try and find like a nice balance between documentary and, taking nice pictures of people. But I would say it's probably like 80 to 85% documentary and then only like 15% nice portraiture and stuff like that. Like throughout the day, I would just focus in on capturing people doing their thing. And I think you have to get involved, be friendly with people, be able to talk to them no matter what sort of level they're on. You have to be able to kind of almost like become a bit of a chameleon and just kind of get involved with the people that you are in that situation. And I feel I am quite good at that, if that makes sense.
No, definitely. Something that I find quite interesting with wedding photography is that you're almost never given ideal circumstances. And when you do get them, it's almost, you feel like Oliver when he finally gets some more.
Yeah.
What does a wedding have to do for you to give you the best opportunity to kind of succeed at what you do best?
I think it's a mix of everything, really. Like nice venue, nice weather, nice company, like people, a couple that is just relaxed, but also trusting of me to kind of do, go roll with my ideas and stuff like that. It all just kind of have to meld into, like you say, like the perfect storm. And when it does happen, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it's happening. And before you know it, it's kind of over, isn't it?
You kind of know at that point that the next three are going to have something that's going to really throw you out because you've been far too lucky all in one day.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
With your style, how hard is it for you to stick with what you do and what you do best and what you enjoy doing when you might have people that approach you and want you to do something that's outside of your comfort zone in terms of what you want to produce as a photographer?
I think, especially more so over the past sort of like year to 2 years, we have luckily reached a level where we can, there's been quite a few occasions where I've actually turned clients down because I've felt that we wouldn't be a right mix of each other. They'd want me to do something that either I didn't want to do or maybe I felt like I couldn't do. And because obviously we're at the stage where, I shoot sort of 50 plus weddings a year. And I know sort of over the past sort of 3 to 4 years, we've been able to hit that. So if I do have a client, say, oh, I really want this sort of look, or I want you to do it this way. We had, there was I don't know if you've heard of her. Her name was Mrs. Hinch. I think that's her name. She's like a blogger, Instagrammer, influencer, and she's quite well known for talking about, ways to clean your house and stuff like this. But she's quite well known. And there's a videographer that we work with quite often. So she approached him first and then he recommended us. So she came to us and she kind of told me what she was interested in. And it would have equated to, like hours upon hours of posing and, almost like we were doing it for a magazine. Like she wanted to get into a wedding magazine or something like that. And that's really kind of not the style we want. I more just want my couples to just have fun, like have a few drinks, have a laugh. We'll capture that as it unfolds, and then I might take you away for a few pictures. But, what she wanted was not what we offered. So at the time I turned her down. She'd already paid a deposit through the videographer, and it wasn't until like a few months later that we discussed what she wanted. So at that point I kind of had to make the decision, like, do I do something I don't want to do, or do I be open and honest with her and give her money back? So we went down that route. I gave her money back. It was all very amicable, and I even recommended someone else that I thought could do what she wanted. I don't know if she actually went with them in the end. And then it wasn't until after that I found out that she was basically like famous. I kind of kicked myself a bit for turning it down, but like I feel like I did the right thing, because you kind of have to be true to yourself in any form of life, but especially when it comes to, your work and wedding photography and stuff.
Well, I remember early on I had a wedding where I was informed from the beginning of the day. So none of this was sort of indicated before the day. But on the day when I arrived, I was told that I wasn't allowed to take photos until instructed. So I spent the whole of bride prep sat in like a room off to the side. They got completely ready, and then I was brought in and they acted out bride prep for about 10 minutes. And I had like an out of body experience with it, because I was just like, this is the least like enjoyable way of approaching this for me, because there's nothing natural to it. And it kind of, you almost feel like you're a camera rather than a photographer, and you're just there to be clicked as opposed to actually have any input yourself. If you don't mind me talking about gear for a little bit, I'm not really someone that actually particularly focuses too much on gear, but one thing I do remember, and I was talking about this with a friend of mine who's just started doing weddings. When I first started looking at wedding photography, there was this old school mentality that the only way to photograph weddings was you had to have what I guess is often referred to as like the holy trinity of lenses. You had to have something like 16 to 35, a 24 to 70, and then a 70 to 200. I've now been shooting weddings for, I think, 6-7 years, and I use almost entirely for that entire time primes, and I stick pretty closely with 35 or 50, an 85 and 135. That's my go-to. Do you feel like there's any hard and fast rules when it comes to gear for wedding photography?
I wouldn't say rules. Definitely similar to you and most other wedding photographers that I know, as they evolve over time, start with zooms and soon kind of realize that primes are just nicer to use. You're sharper, faster, obviously, for reasons. But same as you, I started with a 70D and then moved to 5D. So, I was, one of those guys that had a hold fast moneymaker, 2 5Ds on either side, one with the 24 to 70, one with the 70 to 200, kind of walking about, feeling like the bee's knees. But killing my back at the same time because they were bloody heavy.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I got my first Fuji camera, which I actually bought not for work. I bought it for a holiday. Like me and my wife and my kids were going to Tenerife, and I wanted something small and compact. And I picked up a Fuji X-T3 with the 23mm lens, which is like 35 equivalent. And I took that on holiday for a week. And by the time I got back, I was honestly ready to just sell all of my Canon gear and go in full Fuji, like all chips in. That's how quickly I fell in love with the system. And that's actually what I did. So I sold all of my Canon gear like a few months later before the wedding season started, like once I was a bit more comfortable with it. And I got a few Fujis with a few lenses. And that was my first year with the Fujis. And I thought my work was a million times better than what it was, with the Canons and the zooms and stuff. And it just changed the whole sort of shooting experience, like the way I shoot, the way I think about photography. Everything sort of evolved from just having different gear, So I do think gear is important, but you've got to find what works for you.
What is it that made you change your style then? Or what was it about the changing to the Fuji gear that helped you bring out your style more?
I think having like a lighter setup and being able to kind of like move in and out of people and get closer to them and like more up front helped bring out like that candid aspect as well. Like I'll be on the dance floor of an evening with a beer in one hand and just one Fuji, like with a flash on top of it in the other hand, like doing Shutter Dragon and stuff like that. Just like dancing with people and taking pictures as I'm going. Like, and I think people are more comfortable and more able to give you their real selves when you're like that, because you're kind of like one of them. Like you're also dancing with a drink in your hand, like you're the same. So they're more natural, if that makes sense. But you could never have done that with a Canon 5D in like 70-200. You know, it would have been impossible.
When it comes to the actual lens setup that you have for weddings, what's your main go-tos?
So with Fuji, it's the 24 and 56, which is 35 and 85 equivalent. So I'll have one on either side, and I'll shoot mainly the 35 and the 85. But I've also got the 16 millimeter 1.4, which is 24 millimeter equivalent. So I'll use that group shots and details and stuff like that. I had the 80 millimeter and I've had the 90 millimeter, but I tend to find I never go longer than 85. So I've sold them and don't use them. And then more recently, I've had it for about a year and a half now. I've had the GFX 50R, which is medium format. And I've used the native lenses, but the lens I use the most is a Voigtlander 58 millimeter lens. So it's like not actually made for that system. It's an older lens. But when you put it on the GFX sensor, it gives you the equivalent of about 40 millimeter f1 when you use it on that system. So it's like the bokeh is just crazy on it. And it's very similar to what you'd get with like the Pentax 6.7 and the 105 millimeter. That's basically what you get from that is like a 42 millimeter f1, 43 millimeter f1, something like that. So it's the closest I could get to that look with digital. And, you know, I just love that look. That's like, if I ever do a couples shoot, I'll pretty much just bring that camera and that lens and shoot the whole thing with that. And on a wedding day, when I take couples out for portraits, I'll pretty much just use that because that's giving me the look that I kind of want.
So it's towards the end of last year that I actually was asking around for recommendations on Fuji photographers that shoot weddings because I was looking to switch. And I did switch for a brief time, although my wife in the end kind of stomped her feet. She shoots weddings with me and she wanted to change back to what she was using before. So we moved away from Fuji and I do definitely miss it. The 16mm 1.4 is a lens that I think isn't just the best on the Fuji system. I think it's in the top 5 of any system that's about because of the close focusing and the sharpness and just such a wonderful lens. I wish more companies would look at putting out something that's like a 24mm equivalent that can do what that lens can do. You've just mentioned like the film digital equivalents there, and obviously, I guess I should start off by saying congratulations on hitting 1,000 subscribers on your YouTube channel. And obviously, I found that quite recently. It's been a wonderful thing to watch, especially given the fact that we're all locked in. And I actually started film photography at the start of lockdown as something to kind of keep my brain from rotting while we were left inside. So it's been a wonderful thing to find. Do you find you're a different photographer shooting film to digital?
I think it's actually affected the way I shoot digital in terms of, you know, how much it makes you slow down and kind of think about the shots before you take them. I think a lot of the time with digital, it's so easy to click away and like hope for the best. And you know that one of them is going to be okay, or it's going to be something that you could fix in Lightroom to make it better. But when you shoot film, obviously, especially medium format, most cameras you get 10 photos, maybe 12, you know, if it's 6x6 or something. So you definitely slow down and you think about the shot more and you think about what's going on in the background, what's your subject doing, what's the lighting doing. Like you really do contemplate each and every photo. And I think the more you shoot film and the more that you have that frame of mind, when you pick up a digital camera, it's just subconscious. So you still have that frame of mind. And I shoot, recent weddings and stuff. I know that we've been working less time because I'm not there from 9 a.m. till like 9 p.m. anymore. But definitely noticed I take a lot less photos than what I used to. And that helps obviously when it comes to culling and stuff, because you're more sort of looking out for right moments and then taking the picture when you see it, as opposed to just like click, 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 click. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Why film though? Like obviously at the moment, digital cameras are getting to the point of being essentially spaceships that require no input almost from the person using them. Why now do you think film is coming back in such a big way?
It's definitely coming back in a massive way. And I think it has been building for the past few years. Obviously you've got many sort of YouTubers that I'm sure you follow like I do that are great inspiration. But I just feel that there's a younger generation, especially out there, that never knew of it. and learning about it. There's something very nostalgic about it. There's something exciting about it. Like it's not like the phone in your hand. It's not that quick. Like everybody's got a phone in their pocket these days and they're just like clicking away, and it's so easy to take a picture, upload it to social media, and it's got 100 likes, within 5 minutes. With film, it forces you to slow down. You can't take a picture and show everyone straight away. You can't even see it yourself straight away. When you're sending that film off to be developed, like the whole time you're waiting for it to come back is exciting. You're excited to see what you've got. And I got into developing myself, as I'm sure a lot of people did during lockdown, just from having the time to do it. I've always wanted to do it, but actually having that time to teach myself and learn and stuff has been a blessing. Spending time with the kids and stuff, like I know people talk about what's going on this year is horrible, but like there are good aspects to it. And like you said, getting to 1,000 subscribers, like I started that YouTube channel 2 years ago and I only did like 1 or 2 videos because I just didn't have the time and I just kind of left it on the back burner. But then obviously these past few months, I've had all this spare time. So I've been able to kind of get more involved, and I feel like I've learned much more about cinematography and video and stuff as well. I've taught myself so much over the past few months just because I've been sitting around twiddling my thumbs. But I'll always, appreciate that. I'm rambling now.
No, you're fine. I mean, you just said that obviously 2 years ago you started the YouTube channel, but you were tied up. You couldn't do as much as you probably wanted to. What was it that made you want to put videos out in the first place?
I don't know. In the first video I did was actually a review of the Fuji 80mm macro lens just after it came out. And that's because I know a few people that kind of work at Fuji UK, and one of them said, look, I'll lend this to, I was interested in buying it. And he said, look, I'll lend it to you if you do like a little review or something of it. So he knew I was getting into YouTube. I wanted to borrow the lens. So it kind of went 2 ways. So I said, yep, I'll borrow it. I'll do a little review. And that's had like my most views, although it's old and I watch it and I cringe. It had like 10,000 views or something like that. So I always leave that up there just to remember kind of that was like the first YouTube video I ever did. But yeah, I don't know. Partly just to kind of go with your business aspect. I think, when you run a business, you kind of want to be on all platforms, don't you? Like all sorts of social media and stuff. But then partly just because I was interested in creating content and stuff like that and seeing if other people were interested in what I had to say, A lot of the times when I'm doing videos, I just start to go off on like a ramble and just talking about my thoughts and stuff. And it's funny because there's no one else there to bounce off of. You're just talking to a camera. So sometimes I have to stop myself because I know that the video will end up being an hour long and of me just talking inane nonsense.
So what do you think of the state of photography on YouTube? I've asked this of a few people that I've had on that are fairly prominent YouTubers and ones that are just starting out. Do you think, in general, do you think YouTube is a positive thing for photography?
Yes. I think in general, it's a really positive thing for photography, for digital, for film, for, gearheads and stuff like that. Anytime a new piece of equipment or something comes out, there's instantly, 50 plus reviews from it from different people. And if you're interested in buying something, you wouldn't have had this even just 10 years ago. You'd have to search the recesses of the web or speak to people and try and find someone who's got it. Like you said yourself, when you were interested in moving to Fuji cameras, you were kind of looking to see other Fuji photographers and trying to find people. But nowadays you can go on YouTube and type in like the camera or gear that you're interested in and instantly watch like 5 videos and it will help you make your mind up. Like I still do it all the time. If I want to buy a new lens or a new camera or a new filter, like Moment, do you know the company Moment? They do like filtered stuff.
Yeah.
Like they launched a new filter yesterday that's kind of like a black pro mist kind of thing. And I was interested in it, and straight away they launched it, and like Matt Day and a million other people did reviews for it, and I've already bought one a day after it was released, just because of these videos. So it definitely has a massive impact on photography for sure.
Obviously, the other side of that is it can tip over to the other side, and I think there are because your name's on this, I won't slander anybody, but there are people that definitely abuse the review system to essentially sort of take underhand payments to say something's good just so that you click the link in the description, you get more from it. Obviously, that's a downside to it because there's the potential to benefit from your status, I guess, rather than actually give out accurate information. When it comes to YouTube, do you ever find yourself being tempted to kind of chase what you think would build up more follows or more likes or more subscribes rather than make stuff that, speaks to you?
Yeah, I mean, you obviously have those sorts of thoughts and stuff, but I guess it depends kind of what kind of person you are. Like, not just YouTube, but Instagram, social media, like people who are on the TV, they're all going to get involved in advertisements and stuff like that to make money because that's what they're doing it for, money and for success and stuff like that. But, I'm not into YouTube for money or for success. I'm at the moment, especially just doing it because I've got nothing else to do. I'm doing it for fun. I'm doing it like the main tag or the little comment says I make these videos for my own enjoyment. And it's true. I've just filmed one with my son where we just kind of went out for a photo walk and stuff and I really slapped suit. And I had the most amazing time just like being out with my son, taking pictures and having a laugh, But no, I agree. It's definitely difficult. Like there are people out there that will, take a payment and stuff like that just to advertise something. But I think it depends who you are as a person. Like if you have the mental capacity to see that that's what they're doing, then obviously that's what they're doing and to take anything they say with a pinch of salt. But you're right, there are probably people out there that maybe don't realise that.
I mean, we talked a little bit ago about looking back on your portfolio from 2 years ago, and I think you said that was the time to cringe. Something that I had said to me quite a few years ago, and it's something that's stuck with me all this time, and it still really bothers me because I'm still trying to figure out the thinking behind it. But essentially, a photographer who was a friend of mine said to me he had an issue with the fact that I was taking out older work from my portfolio because it took away the ability to see the signs of improvement. And I've always been fascinated by that, why you would want to leave less good images in your portfolio just so that people can see that you've gotten better at something. That's always stuck with me. Do you think that's something that you should have? You should have work that shows what you've done over the years, or do you think you should just be putting together your best images?
I mean, personally, I think I agree with you. You should just be showing your best work. Like you don't get artists, their shit drawings in galleries, do you? Pardon my French there, but you don't get other people. You don't get, if a professional footballer had a bad day, like he wouldn't want people to see that. Do you know what I mean? You want to show your best work. And although it may take you years and years and years of slogging away to get there, you just want to show people what you're capable of now. Like I'd be the same. I've deleted a few older YouTube videos that I was cringing at and I didn't like. And same with photos. Like, I guess if you want your portfolio to show what you are capable of now, what you have spent time and effort getting to, that's your prerogative. So I wouldn't see why it was anyone else's. What would they get out of seeing your old work anyway? Most clients wouldn't care. They wouldn't want to. They want to know what you can do for them now. Surely not what you could have done 4 years ago.
I mean, to be honest with you, I've been stuck with trying to figure out why photographers are so interested in what other photographers are doing in the way that they are for the entire time that I've been doing it. I came from, originally I was a chef and I was a musician for a while as well. And photography seems to be sort of unto itself in the way that people interact with each other, especially on the negative end of things. I find it very strange, but it's always stuck with me that it, like you say, why would it be an issue that I've had 106 people on the podcast, or 104, something like that. And I'm a fan of all of their work, but at the same time, I'm not going to lose any sleep if they decide to do something with their portfolio that isn't what I would do. I would just probably move on and do something else with my life. Even with all the downtime I have right now, I probably still wouldn't waste time worrying about it. And it's always stuck with me. It's been a bit like when you listen to a song that just sticks in your head for weeks and weeks and you can't get rid of. It's been one of those weird constructive criticisms that I've never been able to shake because I just can't really get my head around it.
Yeah, I don't know. It's funny. Like, obviously, same like you were talking about music a second ago, like bands and stuff like that. They all write, hundreds of songs possibly. They pick the best ones for the album. And then even then, like 10 years down the line when they're famous and they release a best of album, they don't focus on the ones that they didn't like or the mistakes and stuff like that. You learn from it. The photography community is a weird one. I do agree. Like, you do get a lot of great people that are all for pushing each other forward and helping out. And, if you've got a question, if anyone's ever I have people message me all the time. And sometimes like wife's like, who are you talking to? And I'm like, I don't know, some guy from Germany. He's just messaged me a question. What are you doing? I'm like, he's spent the time to ask me a question and reach out to me. Like, it takes 2 seconds to respond and answer. It's no biggie. But then you do get some people that, I don't know, like you say, like, I don't know whether it's jealousy or whether it's like, I don't know what it is, but some photographers are very, can I say bitchy on the podcast?
Oh yeah, go for it. I've said much worse.
Yeah, they're bitchy.
I would say that for the longest time, I had this theory that people pick up a camera in a way to sort of act as a social crutch. And it would basically be like their way to get out and talk to people or get out to the camera club or get out. And when they're out and about, it's an icebreaker for conversation. But the problem with that is that a camera is an incredibly antisocial device in that a lot of people are very skeptical of either having their picture taken or the motivation of someone walking around with a camera and so on. So it actually kind of backfires as being a social crutch. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from, is it's people that maybe don't, not all obviously, but there are people that get involved in photography and they're not well versed socially. And the internet allows you to kind of be bad socially and not suffer many of the consequences that you would if you did it in person, I guess.
Yeah, true. I agree with that.
If you don't mind me sort of quickly doubling back on weddings, because one thing I did want to ask you and I've kind of completely missed it. With your workflow, so you get in from shooting a wedding, you've been out shooting for, 10, 12 hours. You get in, talk me through like the next few weeks of how you go about sort of backing up and editing that wedding. What's your usual timing like?
So, I mean, I back up same day every wedding just because I had one instance a couple of years ago where I lost like half. I didn't look well. I say I lost. I'd backed them. I'd uploaded them to Lightroom, and then a hard drive that I'd backed them up to had gone wrong, and I lost like half the wedding. But I had the smart previews from Lightroom still, so I managed to give them a full gallery. But like half of them were like very low res, so if they ever wanted to print them out, quite big, they wouldn't have worked. It was just the most stressful time for me, and I'd spent a lot of money trying to get this hard drive fixed, and I couldn't and stuff like that. So I always, every wedding, I get home, I back them up to 2 separate hard drives and a cloud system from Seagate, and I put them in a folder. So I'll do that first, and then I'll sit down and have a beer or something. Like, you've got to have a sort of a wind down, almost like a routine, I think, after a wedding. Like there's something that you probably do like every time after a wedding, whether that be back your photos, have a beer and a packet of Kris or whatever it is. Like, it almost becomes like a ritual for getting home from the wedding in order to turn off, because you're just on all day long. And like, a lot of people think that wedding photography or photography in general is just like an easy cop out. They're like, what, you get paid how much for a day's work? Like, but it is physically and mentally draining, especially when, maybe one week you've done like 3 or 4 weddings. Like, it takes so long to get over wedding season. Like, it takes as long as, the winter. By the time spring comes around, you've probably just got over it, and then you're like, oh, right, let's go again. But yeah, so no, I'll back all up the photos, and then usually, like, obviously it's not been the same this year, but within wedding season, I'll usually have like a backlog. So although I've backed them up, I'm still editing a wedding from 2, 3, maybe 4 weeks ago. So they kind of go to the back of the queue. But what I tend to do, just in terms of social media and the couple, is like the week after the wedding, I will just kind of quickly skim through the photos and maybe favorite a few, like flag them up, and I'll edit them and put them out as previews just so they can see them. But yeah, I just work through the backlog as quick as I can. So initial cull, I use Photo Mechanic to cull the images. So I'll do a first cull, and then I put them in Lightroom. And then as I'm kind of going through and quickly editing, I might do a second cull just to get them down a bit smaller. But I usually give clients sort of around, if it's a full day, like sort of 10 hours or whatever, I'll probably give them between 500 and 600, maybe closer to 500 most of the time, final images. But it just depends what's going on, obviously. If they've got bands and like entertainment stuff, you find that you may give them more pictures because there's more things to show.
Basically, this is great because I could break this up into 3 sections and then I managed to mess up and kind of overweave 2 of them. But if we can just talk about portraits to wind down, again, thank you for taking the time to do this. Let's talk about your directorial style with portraits. Is it similar to the way that you direct couples at a wedding, or when you photograph someone that's more used to being in front of a camera, are you a little bit more hands off?
It depends who I'm working with. And it did take me a while. Well, like when I started shooting a lot of weddings, and I'd go do a portrait session, I'd have that frame of mind of like being in a rush. So a lot of the time when I'd shoot portraits with people, I'd be like, right, let's do some here, right, next. And a lot of the models would be like, Jesus Christ, why are we running around? And I'd have to stop and calm down and be like, oh yeah, I don't just have 15 minutes like I would do on a wedding day. I've got all the time in the world. Like, so you have to slow yourself down. But it depends what model I'm working with. There's a lot of models who I know well and have worked with a few times, who I know what they're capable of and they know what they're doing. So I kind of let them do their thing. And then if I see them do something and I'm like, actually, let's go back to that and work on that. Like, I like that look, but maybe, move your arm a bit, move your leg a bit or something like that. But obviously if you're working with a model who's maybe fairly new and stuff, then you have to be a lot more hands-on and, not touching them, obviously, not with COVID, but I mean like telling them what to do and stuff like that. But yeah, I much prefer working with people I've worked with a few times before, because I just feel like there's that element of trust there and comfort. And when you're trying to get like a portrait of someone and get them to really kind of show themselves, it's much easier when you know each other and they're comfortable with you and you're comfortable with them, as opposed to someone you've met for the first time. That's quite tricky to get them to bring themselves out. Does that make sense?
Oh, 100%. And when it comes to your portraits, are you someone that talks through like body position, geometry? Are you coming at it from a technical point of view, or are you talking more like emotionally? How do you go about sort of getting your message across?
Bit of both. I mean, I did a video recently talking about sort of this. Like, I've definitely found over the past year, when it comes to portraiture, I'm more going for an element of story and emotion over sort of like composition and body position and lighting and stuff like that. Like, the thing that always at the forefront of my mind is, what is this image going to look like at the end? And how's it going to make the viewer feel? Like, is it going to bring an emotion out of them? Is it going to make them, question it or something like that? You kind of want that kind of reaction from a photo, because if people just look at it and go, oh, that's a pretty person, they'll move on. So I'm always trying to think about how I could bring that out, whether that's like create a story in my head first of all, and like we'll actually arrange the whole shoot around the story concept I've got in my head or something, or just, trying to get the person who I'm taking a photo of to just like really look into the camera and like show themselves, so you can look at it and really think like you can kind of get a feel for who that person is. But I will, tell people to move an arm or a leg or stand like this or sit like this if I think it would add to the image.
And what makes a really good portrait subject for you?
What makes a really good portrait subject? Someone who, again, can kind of be comfortable enough in front of the camera to be themselves. Like, I'm about to start this project that's been like 2 years in the making, of just like my local area, like kind of, have you heard of Humans of New York?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So when they go around, I watched a TED talk on that about a few years ago. And the guy who started it, obviously talking about how he not only takes pictures of, strangers, but he talks to them about their life and stuff like that. So it was just, I did a project a couple of years ago. It was called like What Makes Us Happy. And it was about, I went around with a Fuji X100 F, taking pictures. Like, I put a post out on Facebook, like, is anyone interested? And I take a picture of a person doing something they love. I had loads of people that come forward, people that I knew and people I didn't know, knitting, playing football, photography, just doing different things that they really love doing. So I took a picture of them doing that thing and then tried to take a picture of them directly afterwards to see if you could kind of see the happiness and that emotion through the photo. I did like an exhibition with the photos and stuff to raise money for a suicide prevention charity. It all came about because a friend of mine committed suicide. We're getting deep here, aren't we? So I kind of, I wanted to do something to raise money for a suicide prevention charity, and that all come from that. But shortly after that, I had the idea for this I live in a place called Southend-on-Sea, The project was called Southend Strangers. So essentially, it was just going around strangers, asking them a series of like interview questions like this, but just like really short, like, what's your first name and your age? How long have you lived in Southend? What do you like about Southend? And then kind of taking a few pictures throughout these interview questions, but then starting to get a bit deeper with it, like, what's the most difficult situation you've had in your life? You know, what are your hopes and dreams for the future and stuff like that? And as I'm talking to them, just again stopping and going, do you mind if I take another picture? And then more questions. And at the same time that they're answering the questions, I answer the questions myself. So it's almost like we're kind of getting to know each other through this whole process and opening them up. And I just wanted to see how different the first picture to the last picture looked, and if you can see this person letting down their barriers and opening up, and actually if there's a difference at all and stuff like that. So I'm hoping to start that soon, especially now with the news that I've not got many weddings going ahead for a little while longer yet. But it's just, for me, it's more about the confidence. Like, there's a big difference working with people that have hired you to just approaching absolute strangers on the street and seeing if they'll let you ask them questions and take their photos. So it's been a long time coming, me just having the confidence, and I feel like I'm kind of almost at that point now where I can do it.
Well, it's a great cause as well, considering, I think we're headed for a bit of an epidemic when it comes to mental health with everything that's been going on for the last 7-8 months. I think that's obviously something that's going to be a big deal, and something that, like you say, affects you personally. I can definitely see it from my side as well. Let's wrap up. I want to. There's one question I really want to go through with you, because you're a wedding photographer. I love your work, and you seem to be extremely passionate about being a wedding photographer for what I think is all the right reasons. And something that I get an awful lot. I had it at camera. I went to a camera club last year for 1 year. I'm not going to make that mistake again. And in talking to photographers over the years, wedding photography has a sort of a stereotype, and other photographers almost seem to pity wedding photography as being like the job that you do because no one else wanted to do it. Or I know quite a few people myself that only get into it for the financial reasons and not for the enjoyment of it, which I can't think of a worse way to get into wedding photography, because if you don't enjoy it, it's going to kill you. I was wondering if you could just help me sell the virtues of being a wedding photographer and how much fun it is as a job and how fulfilling it is and so on. What's great about being a wedding photographer?
I think anyone that gets into wedding photography for the financial aspect doesn't last longer than a year, because they soon realize how difficult it is and how draining it is. And, yes, you can make a lot of money from it. And the past few years, like, we've done really well with it. But that's just not what it's about. We absolutely love, I guess maybe like, because you said your wife helps you, my wife helps me as well. And I've got a few other people. There's a team of like 5 of us now, to be honest with you, just people that I rely on and use on a regular basis. And everyone that I work with has just got to have the same mindset as me. Like, we go in it for the fun. From the moment we arrive in the morning, happy smiley faces, like, there's a certain buzz of excitement on a wedding day that you just do not get in any other situation. It's almost like a festival. Like, everybody who's there is just up for having fun. On the good weddings, obviously, you might get a few weddings where it's not quite as happy as you want it to be. But it's just, it's really exciting. Like, everything throughout the day is exciting. Everybody's up for a laugh. Like, and we're the same, I will have a beer with the groom in the evening, then up against the bar. I'll have a dance with the bride in the evening, like, stuff like that. Like, you've got to be the kind of person who's up for that and ready to do it as well. And if you're of the frame of mind where you're just seeing it as a job as opposed to, I guess, like a way of life, then I don't think it's going to work out for you.
I think as well, for a photographer, there's no more fulfilling job, because you get to be portrait photographer, a landscape photographer, an architectural photographer, a product photographer. You get to do macro work if you want. There's so many different ways that you can approach it. And obviously the reportage side of it, which is the part I enjoy the most. Nothing will make you flex muscles and actually improve yourself quite like shooting a wedding, because you don't get the choice to kind of hide behind the one thing you're good at and let everything else rot. You have to keep upping your skill on all of these different areas as well.
100%, yeah. It's non-stop. It's all go all day long. You don't get a retake. You don't get a redo. You don't very rarely have time to kind of sit and think. Like, you just have to work on the go, and that hones your skills as a photographer very quickly. You know, when I was started using cameras with manual focus lenses and stuff like that, like my manual focusing skills just skyrocketed, because you have to do it like a manual focus on the bride walking down the aisle and stuff like that. So I think it's like you say, it's a very fulfilling job and it's very rewarding. I do think you get a lot of wedding photographers that can get quite egotistical, and it's hard not to get to that frame of mind when you've got clients and maybe even other photographers constantly saying to you like, oh, lovely photo, lovely work, oh, great job and stuff like that. It's hard to almost stay grounded. I don't know if you find that sometimes. Like, you've got to remember that you're not the best photographer out there. You're not the bee's knees, and there's plenty of room for improvement. It's hard when you've got so many people constantly saying great work and stuff, especially with social media. When you share a picture and you get likes and comments and stuff like that, it's hard to stay down to earth.
Yeah, I think social media is an interesting one because it puts people in a position where they show themselves in certain ways. I mean, talking in a kind of general sense, they show themselves in a certain light, and then they get the adulation from that. They conflate the numbers of social media into, I don't know, like ego points, like you say. It's something that can kind of fluff your feathers quite a bit. And some people just don't react very well to that. Some people can cope with it and some people go the complete other way. I'm fortunately in a position where I'm terrible at making myself look good, so I never have to worry about getting too much adulation. But that seems to be the trick. I really do appreciate you taking the time to do this. It's been fascinating to talk to you. I am a huge, huge fan. Everybody does need to go and subscribe to your YouTube channel so we can get that up to 10K as quickly as possible, because it's one of the hidden gems of YouTube. And at the moment, everyone's watching the same 4 channels on YouTube. They need to find some new stuff to watch, and you are one of those new things that they need to find. Where's the best place for people to find all of your great work and your YouTube channel?
So obviously YouTube, Tom Humble. I've got a few, I don't know why I did this, but I split my Instagram accounts to work, digital and film. So Tom Humble Film, Tom Humble Just, or the Humble Photography Co. is the work one. But there will be a website coming soon just for me personally, and it will just be something like tomhumble.com, but that's in the future.
It's been great to talk to you. Very much like your name. You've been tremendously humble. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you. Really enjoyed it.